Welcome back, motorized bike enthusiast. In today's video I'm going to show you how, along with the community's help, I was able to take an already respectable 40-mile-an-hour Firestorm Zeda 80 and turn it into a 50-mile-an-hour monster. I would first like to point out that I do not promote reaching these speeds on a bicycle. I neither find it practical or safe, and it's not something you're going to see me doing very often. I simply want to show you what's possible with these little China motors and the combined experience of the community. Because I know I can't stop you, and many of you will be motivated to try these modifications, I would suggest sticking with the larger sprocket on your bike. You'll have incredible acceleration while maintaining a relatively safe speed that won't instantly kill you if you have a tire blowout or a chain snap. This video is a direct result of consolidating information from some of the brightest minds in the hobby, and is a clear example as to why you should never trust one individual who claims to be a know-it-all. Always get a second opinion and try to do your research. By themselves, many of the modifications we make to this motor will have a negligible effect on performance, but when combined with other modifications, their effects become amplified. I started by replacing the magneto on our Firestorm. The original one's stators were bent a little out of whack, and I could never adjust it to get a nice gap between the magnet and the stators. Because I've had good luck with it in the past, I decided to retard the timing on our Firestorm. Because of imperfections in these motors, this is something that'll need to be played with each individual motor, but for me it smoothed out the mid-range quite nicely. A stronger spark will help pretty much any motor, but by itself is not something you'll usually notice on these inefficient little motors. It's when you start improving the efficiency that a stronger spark makes a bigger difference. So for this I went with the BBR Tuning Stage 2, which claims to give a stronger spark and have a slightly improved ignition curve. When discussing reed valves, I'm stepping into unfamiliar territory. I'm able to find a lot of information online about how they work, but not a lot of information about their main benefits. I'm just going to discuss what I've noticed so far on these bicycle engines, but there are other individuals out there who may be able to give you better information. In my past experience, putting a reed valve on a bicycle engine that was originally designed for a piston port doesn't do much in the way of performance by itself. It does increase efficiency and give you more mileage. But up until we add the other modifications you'll see throughout the video, I never noticed any performance gain adding a reed valve to a motor that was originally designed for a piston port. What I've noticed so far is putting a reed valve on these motors gives you more freedom to work with the intake and add a more efficient boost port. When it comes to carburetors, the sky's the limit. I suggest trying a few different ones. Just make sure whatever ones you decide to try, you can get main and pilot jets for, because it's unlikely that an aftermarket carburetor stock jetting is going to be right for a motorized bike. Personally, I believe there to be two sets of individuals when it comes to carburetors: individuals who claim that the NT carburetors suck, and individuals who claim that there are better options. The latter are the individuals who have actually tried tuning, and the former are ones who need a little more experience. I say this because the majority of builders will not find the limit of the NT carburetor, as I personally know it's good for 42 miles an hour, and then some. Anyways, I'll summarize what I've gone through so far on this build, but I make no claims that my setup is optimal, and I'm currently struggling with an idle issue which we'll discuss later in the video. So far in this setup, I've tried the NT Speed, PZ19, PZ20, and PZ22. Out of all the carburetors, I found that the NT Speed to be the most trouble-free, but lacking in top-end performance. The PZ20 and 22 act about the same as the 19, but they tend to have a position close to wide-open throttle where they no longer give you any increase in performance. I found that the PZ19 has a linear power curve where it increases in throttle response all the way up to wide open throttle. I would also like to point out that the PZ20 and 22 have a unique pilot jet that I simply cannot find, so keep that in mind when weighing your options. I'll leave a link in the description to as many things in this video as I can think of, and the carburetor along with its corresponding jets will be included. For the sake of time, I cannot include every single detail about what I've done to this motor. However, throughout the Performance in Portworx series playlist, you should be able to keep up to speed with what's going on. Port work on these cylinders is where all your modifications come together, and it's what can make or break the motor as a whole. There's so much room for improvement and experimentation. But because two-stroke engine port timing is something that's easy to understand but hard to master, there's no way to tell whether or not my port timings are optimal. I'll put them up on screen and you can see the results for yourself. For this particular cylinder, I wanted to maintain mid-range performance while gaining some top-end speed, something that's usually a big no-no when it comes to two-stroke engines. But there is a catch, and that's in the boost port. For my situation, I decided to add the boost port about 1 millimeter above the transfers, and generally I see that these are added with the transfer level or slightly below. I can't say whether or not this is an improvement over the other options, it's just what I'm running at the moment. I also wanted to experiment with not windowing the piston for this first cylinder, instead going with an intake trench. I have no real reason for doing this other than I just wanted to see what the effects would be, but later on during the series I'll be adding a windowed piston with a fresh cylinder to see what the difference might be. In a nutshell, the port work we've done to this motor is widen and raise the exhaust, add a trench and boost port to the intake. Now on to a balanced crank. Because I know this motor is going to be spinning well beyond 7,000 RPM, I would like to balance the crank to reduce vibration. This will increase the reliability of the motor as well, and just feel more confident at higher speeds. I'll leave a link in the description to 2 videos which show you how to balance your crank, one which is done with the drill press, and the other which is done by hand. I'd like to give a big shout out to Sean from the Discord server for hooking us up with his own balanced crank. Unfortunately, the seller sold him one with a short stroke, even though it was clearly listed as a 40mm stroke. So I wasn't able to use it in this motor, but it will see use in another motor in the future. But still, not all was lost, as I was able to use his video to balance the crank by hand without the use of a drill press. We actually intended on using a drill press, but my buddy's wasn't quite large enough, and it wouldn't clear the crank. Seeing as this was the first time I ever attempted it, one hole was perfect and the other was slightly off. However, it didn't seem to matter too much in our situation, as the motor feels much smoother than it did out of the box. For now, and because this is the first time I ever tried it, I just went with the one hole on each side of the crank, 15mm deep and a 1/2 inch wide. Later on, when we upgrade to the Minarelli, I'll be sure to add the 2 auxiliary balancing holes as shown in Sean's video, after double checking with Darcy from DLH Performance to make sure the specifications are correct. On to stuffing the case and reed, something I won't touch on too much because I don't fully understand the benefits yet, but from what I understand is reducing the volume of the case itself helps to improve performance, by ensuring that more of the fuel-air mixture gets into the combustion chamber rather than just sitting in the case. I believe there is a balance to this though, as if you stuff the case too much, you might not have enough fuel-air mixture to actually fill the combustion chamber to its optimal level. For me, the main reason I wanted to do this is because adding the reed valve increases case volume. Essentially everything after the reed flaps is more volume in the case. This includes the intake runner. With a piston port design, you have less case volume because the entire intake and the reed block is not included in the system. And combining this with a balanced crank that removed material from the crank and increased volume further, stuffing was something I was definitely interested in. This should also slightly increase the crankcase pressure when the transfer ports open, helping to flow the transfer charge into the cylinder quickly. At high RPMs, this should be beneficial, as you want to get that charge into the combustion chamber as fast as possible. But at low RPMs, this could be detrimental, as more of the transfer charge can work its way out the exhaust before the exhaust port closes. Hence to why we have the boost port slightly above the transfers. At low RPMs, the boost port opening slightly before the transfers will help relieve some of that pressure, and because it's at the back of the cylinder, it won't make its way to the exhaust port quite as quickly as it would if it was just the transfer ports opening. But at high RPMs, the slight opening of the boost port before the transfer simply doesn't make a difference because everything is happening so fast. At least that's what I'm led to believe, and if that's confusing, I apologize. This case and reed stuffing was provided by DLH Performance, and I'll be sure to leave a link in the description so you can contact them in case you're interested in purchasing them yourself. Installation was relatively easy, although a bit of machining and sanding flat of the case was required. These cases are not all identical, so he has to make them as universal as possible, but it was a simple fix. Although for the reed stuffing plates, they seemed a little bit small for my reed block. I assume this is for the same situation. Some of these reed blocks are probably machined a little bigger or smaller. In this situation, I would have liked to see these plates a little bit bigger, and if they required machining down for a smaller block, that's something that the user could easily do anyways. Finally, our last major modification since the last episode in the series, a Real MZ65. If I have time, I'll try to compare this against the deluxe pipe in a future episode. Now I'll go ahead and take you guys for a ride along with our speed run, and after we're done I'll come back with my final thoughts, a couple issues we're dealing with, and the future of this build. I had to replace the rubber gasket I made with Felpro material, simply because the rubber kept swelling up, but that's Felpro gasket material right there. This bike has killed 2 of these. I don't know if this brand is defective or if it's just something unique about the setup, but it's 2 different CDIs, so I think it's just these ones suck.
It's still there as far as I can tell. It's definitely leaking a lot more. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, and by the way, that's 52 miles an hour, and I still have mid-range power.
Now let's sum up the build, deal with some issues, and talk about its future. Well, at the moment, the mid and high RPMs are fantastic. As expected, low RPM performance is nothing impressive. It's just a trade-off you're going to make when you go for these speeds on a single-speed two-stroke. As I'm sure you can tell from that speed run, we're probably running a little oil-rich. This is still on 32:1. At this point, I think it's finally time to move this particular motor up to 40:1. There's really only one main issue I've been dealing with on this build ever since I added the reed, and that's the idle. I'm happy with the main jet and the needle position, as the bike seems to be running like a top as long as I'm on the throttle. I've used Ultra Gray all along the entire reed system, and there's no air leaks as far as I can tell. But the bike will not idle. It idles high, sounds soft, and then it dies, only idling for a few seconds, maybe half a minute at the most. I've tried the largest pilot jets I can get, and the air screw adjustments don't seem to make any difference whatsoever. It's not isolated to the PZ19 either. It's done it with the NT, the PZ20, and the 22. So I don't think this is a carburetor issue. Feel free to add your input to the comments, as any help is appreciated. Here's my theory, but this is just a shot in the dark. And I think it might be because we trenched the intake instead of adding a window to the piston. You see, when you add a reed valve, from what I understand, is you have to go richer on the jets. There's not as strong of an intake pulse. With a trenched cylinder, you essentially have 180 degrees of practical intake duration. It's technically 360, but only the vacuum matters. With a windowed piston, you still have a slight intake pulse once the window peaks over the intake. But with a trench, you have no real intake pulse, so the gradual buildup of vacuum is not quite enough to give enough fuel through the pilot jet. That's just my theory, and it could be completely wrong. Hopefully we'll find a solution. So what's in store for the future of this build? Well, currently I'm not sure. In next week's video, if I have time, we'll compare the Real MZ65 against the BikeBerry Deluxe to see how much of this performance is actually coming from the pipe. However, because I have so many projects scheduled and I'm strapped for time, I might just jump straight into starting the Minarelli build. We'll find out how it goes in next week's video. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video and got some useful information, and until next time, ride safe.
Apparently some of my Discord members sent me something. I don't know what it is, but I'm guessing it's a Christmas present. Oh, it's lots of something. Oh, they got me a bike cover because they know I keep all my stuff outside. Another bike cover. They know I got a lot of bikes. A gift for you. Enjoy your gift. From Sean, Machine, and RIP, and Tan. You guys are awesome. Oh, vinyl sticker paper. Because we make everybody stickers.
Right on.
Do you guys know I use so much damn sandpaper? It's sandpaper. It's legit sandpaper. You have no idea how handy this stuff comes in. I use it all the time. And we got something else here. Screw extractors. You know, with them China girls, you always be stripping stuff out. Oh, good screw extractors. Hello. You guys are awesome. I freaking love this community. Thank you so much, guys.